Testing.
Okay, I'm going to call to order the public hearing in the Village of Riverwood's appropriations ordinance for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2024. I need a roll call, please.
Trustee Clayton,
Here.
Trustee Hollander,
Here.
Trustee Jameson,
Here.
Trustee Smith,
Here.
President Ford.
Present.
We have the quorum.
Okay, where this purpose of this hearing is to review and to have comment on our appropriations ordinance. I'm asking our village attorney to please lead us through that discussion.
The appropriations ordinance is in the board packet, starting on page 32. Every year we point out that we have a budget process. The budget is an advisory document. It's a management tool. And it was part of the consideration that the board gave during the finance workshop. We looked at projected expenses, projected expenditures. And in the appropriation ordinance, we include two columns. One is not required by law, but we put it in anyway. It's the column that says amount budgeted. And next to it is the amount appropriated. So basically, we follow the amount that we think is the budgeted number, what we think we need to have to spend. For the appropriation ordinance, because it's what lawyers call balloon appropriations, we appropriate a little extra to have cushion. It doesn't say that we'll spend the amount that's appropriated. We only intend to spend the amount budgeted, but we appropriate more because without the authority to spend, we just simply can't spend the money at all. And the process of going back in time and amending an appropriation ordinance is actually quite difficult. So our habit as a village for many years has been to bump up the appropriation about 10% from the budget. So if you follow through the appropriation ordinance, you'll see the amount budgeted, the amount appropriated. And I'll just draw your attention to a couple of outliers that cause the total appropriation to jump up a little bit beyond what the budget would show. If, for example, you turn to page 33 of the packet, just before you get to the subtotal for total administrative expenses, total administrative expenditures, you'll see that we have a line item for contingency and a line item for transfers out to the capital fund. And the contingency number, the budget was only 300,000. Actually, we started thinking about some of the infrastructure projects that we have and other uses, land acquisition. We bumped up contingency to 2 million in the appropriation. The transfers out to the capital fund was always anticipated to be about 2 million to deal with a series of infrastructure projects and needs. But as you can see, the appropriation has jumped up because we increased the contingency amount from 300,000 to 2 million. There's another example of this. So these appropriation numbers go by fund, by the general fund, the water fund, the sewer fund, capital projects fund. We use fund accounting in the village. You'll see that the difference between the budgeted amount and the appropriated amount is very similar, except for maybe that 10% default increase in the motor fuel tax fund and the water fund, in the sewer fund. There's really not much difference. If you go all the way, though, to page 39 of the packet, when you look at our TIF funds, the older TIF fund, again, the difference between the budgeted and appropriated amount is very small. But in the Deerfield TIF allocation fund, although we didn't have a budget item for this, we did increase the potential capital outlay to $2 million. Again, this could be for potential land acquisition within the TIF district. And so having this authority gives us the ability to make a decision about what to do without worrying about whether we had sufficient appropriation authority. Once you get past the major funds of the village, general fund, water, sewer, capital projects fund, the balance of the appropriation ordinance is dealing with the special service areas. These are basically just items that we fill in so that if an SSA comes to us and wants to do a road repair or spend money for maintenance, they have the authority already built into the appropriation to spend that. We also show towards the end of the appropriation ordinance amounts for debt service on the bonds that we have outstanding. This is partly for convenience that the bond ordinance itself, when it was adopted, is sufficient as an appropriation, but we show it anyway to remind ourselves that we have these amounts. Finally, if you turn back to page 49 and 50 of the packet, we recap the appropriations by fund all the way through. It's a big, scary number, but at this point, you appropriated all kinds of amounts that each SSA may or may not, very unlikely to spend, but we give them the authority. And that's why the number appears to be large. But again, if you go back to the actual budgeted amounts, that's what we're intending to spend, but for a couple of those contingencies. So that's a brief rundown. There's a estimate of revenues prepared by our finance director, showing anticipated revenues coming in from our known revenue sources. And that's all I have. That's a brief summary of the appropriation ordinance.
Okay, trustees, trustee Hollander, I believe you had
On page 36, the total general fund was 6,000,008 and it's now doubled to almost 13 million.
Right.
I was trying to follow the additional amounts that you were
I came up
making
with
it a contingency, but that seems like $7 million more this year than last year. It just doesn't seem.
no, not more than last year, just more than the budget. In other words, if you look at last year's, we had a much higher number for the appropriation than the budget also, because we had other contingencies. We used to do one every year for possible land acquisition. So we built in a cushion. If you look, you'd have to compare the appropriation to last year to this year rather than to the budget.
But we budgeted more than we spent last year, correct?
I don't know, probably a little bit, but we know we're in the budgeting process. We don't usually include these, I call them outlier, appropriation amounts.
We did budget more than we spent last year.
Right. So if this was last year's budget of 6.8 million and we budgeted more than we actually spent, and now you're increasing again the budget to 13 million.
No, not the budget.
Not the budget, the
appropriation.
appropriations, right?
Because we have these unusual line items and we had, I didn't look back to see what the appropriation amount was in last year. I don't know if I could pull that out, but it wasn't the same as the budget. It was also higher.
Okay.
Are there any other comments on part of the trustees?
Yeah, any public comment?
Is there any public comment on our appropriations ordinance? Okay, hearing none, I believe it's time to close the hearing. May I have a motion to close the hearing, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, all opposed, same sign. The hearing's now closed. Now we will call to order the real business. The meeting of the Board of Trustees, the Village of Riverwoods. If you'll please stand with me and say the pledge. The pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty. Roll call, please.
Trustee Clayton,
Here.
trustee Hollander,
Here.
trustee Jamerson,
Here.
trustee Smith,
Here.
President Ford.
Here. Okay, do I have a motion for approval of the minutes of the Board of Trustees meeting from March 5th?
So moved.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Are there any comments or questions, suggestions? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Next on the agenda is the Finance Director's report. Director Vasquez, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to highlight a few items about the budget tonight. In the appropriation ordinance, which is on the agenda tonight, the budgeted numbers are also included for both expenses and expected revenues. village staff manages to the approved budget amounts, but the spending authority is from the appropriated amounts. Again, the appropriated amounts are 10% higher than budgeted numbers with the few exceptions that were discussed. The budgeted numbers were developed based on discussion and guidance from the board that came at our December finance workshop. A detailed budget draft was provided to the board on February 23rd for review and comments. A few adjustments were made after that draft, and a summary of those changes was sent to the board and included in the packet tonight. The following changes, I'll summarize them, that were made to the administration department budget. Website maintenance was lowered from 7,000 to 5,000. 7,000 was added for internet/cable expense, and 13,000 was added for our IT consultant work. In the building department, the administrative hearings judge line item was increased from 1,000 to 8,500 to account for the fact that we are now having regular administrative hearings. This is what I would probably call a transition budget year, as both I and Director Witt become more familiar with the various programs and needs of the village. Should there be a need during the year for any budget changes, we would bring it to the board as a budget amendment. I would like to highlight the great job that Chief Dano does with his department budget, anticipating the police department expenses almost to the penny. It is a goal of mine to mirror this accuracy with the other parts of the village budget in future years. Also sent to the board and included in the packet was a surplus deficit table of the general, MFT, water, and sewer funds to give an idea of how these funds are currently operating on a revenue versus expense basis. Most notably, the water fund is budgeted at a $1.7 million deficit in 2024. Should be noted that the water fund also has $1.7 million of capital expenses that were budgeted in 2024, which is significantly higher than what we have spent on capital in the water fund in past years. Director Witt and I will work with GHA to determine if all of these capital expenses are necessary in the current year. We will also work with GHA on a plan for needed capital expenses in the water fund in the coming years. I've already discussed at prior board meetings that a water rate increase will be necessary to keep pace with the increase coming this summer from Northbrook. As the cost of maintenance and capital improvements continue to rise, it may be necessary to discuss a rate increase that not only captures the increases from Northbrook, but also accounts for the rising costs associated with maintaining our water system. As we wrap up the budget, the audit season will get into full swing. After the audit is completed and presented, I plan to begin our 2025 budget process in July to get back on track with a fall finance workshop and a goal of bringing the budget and appropriations to the board in December. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to thank the mayor, the board, department heads, and village attorney for all your help in completing this budget. When you're a new employee to a village, there's a lot of history to understand when you're anticipating expenses and revenues and understanding the programs that go into that. The help everyone helped to provide context and understanding for me this year was very much appreciated. Thank you all again.
Are there any comments or questions for our finance director? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to have a motion for the approval of the bills, please.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions or comments on the bills as presented? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Clayton,
Aye.
Trustee Hollander,
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson,
Aye.
Trustee Smith.
Aye.
Motion
Bills are
passed.
approved. Thank you. Before we go further in our agenda, I would be remiss if I didn't stop for a moment so we could acknowledge the passing of our former mayor, Bill Kaplan. And I believe our village attorney has a couple of comments he would like to make.
Thank you. Most of you, many of you maybe knew Bill Kaplan. He was mayor from 2000 until 2013, so quite a long time in the history of the village. And I served under him during all of that time. He was a good steward and manager of a small business. He understood that the village was a family business, Everyone had a part to contribute. I was trying to think for those who weren't around at the time, and would try to summarize some of what he stood for and tried to accomplish during his time. I thought of three examples of issues that he initiated and was largely responsible for: water extensions in the village, woodland protection, and mandatory fire sprinklers. In the early 2000s, the village proposed special service areas to bring Lake Michigan water. And, today, more than 2/3 of the village has access to Lake Michigan water. But it's probably not remembered that the hearings back then at the time were full of acrimony and challenges to the need for those services. Mayor Kaplan never relented in his advocacy for the advantages that he thought would accrue to the village, and strongly supported the extension of water. In the same period, the village's commitment to environmental stewardship was increasing. There were a number of proposals to limit the size of homes. It was felt that the new larger homes being built were impacting the woodlands in the village, which they were. Bill was a real estate broker. He felt that size restrictions would be harmful, but also maybe not effective to accomplish the purpose of protecting the woodlands. We looked at how to actually address the real issue, which was the removal of woodlands, the removal of ground layer plants. And with Chuck Stewart and Pat Glenn, we developed a model of protecting the woodlands by restricting the percentage of woodland that could be removed. There was a village town meeting. I think it was at Discover. It was attended by a lot of people. The board at the time was very concerned that we were going too far, affecting the rights of property owners, possible overreach by the village. It was under Bill's leadership that the first version of our woodland protection ordinance was crafted and eventually adopted by the Board of Trustees. It was something of an experimental move, first of its kind, and at odds with the real estate community in which Bill was a member, but he never wavered. The last example I could point out was that our fire protection district strongly urged the adoption of mandatory fire sprinklers in new homes. This was another issue where Bill's professional real estate community was deeply at odds with his position, but he stuck through to it. The board, after a lot of opposition from members of the real estate community who showed up to say it was a terrible idea, nevertheless adopted fire sprinklers as a requirement in our code. I could go on with these examples. I think Bill had very important core values and he fought for them. He did not shy away from difficult issues. He was, I said, a throwback to a generation that conceived of a common good. And his conception might be different than yours. He could wage battle relentlessly. There were many spirited debates, but he waged the battles, I believe, for the common good. These are some of my reminiscences of him in his public role. My day-to-day interaction was with a private man who was extremely loyal, kind, and funny. And I wrote a little note, maybe it'll go on the village website, some of the funny things that he said, but I'll leave it at that. I thought he was very devoted to the village, and I think we were very lucky to have his service.
I would only add, he was my mayor, he was my friend, he was my neighbor. And all of those things that Bruce has said, I would echo strongly. And if anyone wishes to add anything, happy to have that at this time. But in place of that, if we could just take a moment to honor a good mayor, a loyal mayor, and someone who put the village first. Absolutely. Absolutely, Sherry. Why don't you step to the microphone?
When we talk about Bill being kind, it wasn't just the village that he was concerned with. He was concerned with every human being in it. And I remember one day coming to the village and I had been put on some kind of crazy medication that made me suicidal. And I was talking to Bill and I said, I think I want to go home and die. I think I'm ready. And he sat me in his office and he kept me in his office all day watching me would not let me go home until I wasn't ready to kill myself anymore. There was a sensitivity to the man that was remarkable and a kindness that he extended to everyone. I saw him several times after they moved. They would come and walk the dog park with me with their dog. And I will always miss him.
Thank you for that. Well, in his honor, we'll do big things together. We'll think of our community first, and we'll move on and make a mark for Riverwoods in Lake County. So we'll be back to business then. I'm hoping that his widow, my friend Sherry, will take a look at this recording at some point, and I know she'll be happy to see it. So moving on, the treasurer's report. Treasurer isn't with us this evening. Director of Community Services report. Director Witt, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of updates. Late February, we met with the representative from Verisk, who is preparing an evaluation of our building code processes and codes themselves. A couple of items to note. The Verisk ratings go from a low score of 9 to a high score of 1. I'm only aware of maybe one, if not two, communities in the United States that are at a 1. We currently are listed with ISO as a 4, which I think is pretty darn good for a community our size and the staff level that we have. So the concern is that we want to make sure that we can maintain that. Some of the things that they look at, the biggest criteria are the addition of the codes that you're on. Sometimes the number of staff, we're going to hurt in that area, but also the credentials for the staff that we do have, which I'm not certain that we won't do very well with regard to that. But again, going back to this concept of code adoption, if the village does not, or let's put it this way, I was told by the representative that communities that are on a cycle of a code that is more than 6 years old get an automatic rating of 9 near the bottom of the arrow, which means it affects the community's insurance ratings and you don't get as favorable a rating for your home insurance. And potentially, I think that filters through for flood insurance as well. So it's key at some point that we work toward a code adoption. However, the Code Council is not helping anybody because several of the books that we want to adopt aren't published yet for 2024, and that's the addition that we need. So we have about 3/4 of them. We're going through those, making a list of things that we want to work with Attorney Hoover and others as far as amending those codes, adopting them. But it's going to take a bit because, again, we have to wait for the books to come through. The second thing would be that a couple of weeks ago, GHA let out the bids for the UPS work at the 3 lift stations that need improvements to the UPS system so we don't have a repeat of the failure that we had at the Thorngate station. We got 3 bids that came in, 2 independents and 1 from the county. I was a little surprised. The high bid came in at about $2,300. And the county came in as low bid at just over $1,300. So we've authorized them to proceed with the work, and we're just waiting for them to schedule when that work can occur. And the third item, just as a reminder, in case anybody wants to stop in and watch, we have the second round of administrative adjudication hearings tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning. We have 3 cases. One's a carryover, which as of today, that party is not ready. So I'm sure it'll get continued again. But the other 2 might set a little bit of a standard because we have a construction site where the contractor is just refusing to get in line with the work that's happening and the view of that project to the neighbors. So we'll see what happens, and hopefully the word will spread to other contractors that we're serious about enforcing construction-related activities and code compliance. So that's all I have. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for our director?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Consultants report, attorney
Everything I have will come later in the agenda.
agenda, engineers report. Oh, you got to swing that around there. Yeah.
Good evening. Just make sure I don't want to pull the plug on this thing. Okay.
You can drag it. It's got, I can see there's more.
All right.
Don't tell chief. I undid some of that.
I know nothing. Good evening, everyone. My only thing for my report tonight is on last Friday, I met with Lake County Public Works and their contractor who's been doing the force main installation along Saunders. They have gotten to about right before the fire station, and they've kind of paused because they're waiting for additional permits with Lake County DOT to move forward. As you recall, they started up by West Course, came down Saunders. They're going to continue down to the intersection of Deerfield, go across Deerfield to the west side of Saunders, and then continue down a little bit farther with Saunders with a brand new force main. We met with them on Friday because they were getting to that intersection by the police station, and they potentially have to do more open cut than directionally drilled due to some utility conflicts. And obviously over there we have the preserved areas, we have trees. So the main reason to meet was to meet with the village ecologists to talk about what can be touched, what can be taken down, what needs to be saved. But ultimately, we also talked about the open trenching, which is going to impact the sidewalk segment that is from the corner of Deerfield and Riverwoods Road, kind of where the village sign is, and then heading, a little bit north, I guess that'd be like northwest, up to Saunders Road. They have to remove several squares of concrete in order to do the open trench and to get their bore pit in. They stated that they were going to, in the contract, it is to put back temporary stone, but with their bore pit right at the corner there, that's 6 feet deep, we felt it's a safety concern. So they're going to be formally requesting to the village to close down that segment of sidewalk from April 15th to approximately Memorial Day weekend in order to create a safe atmosphere for people to avoid that area. And unfortunately, they have to wait till April 15th because Lake County DOT will not allow them to do work within the right of way until April 15th. It's just their code that they follow. So don't ask me where it came from, but that's where it is. So I'm just giving everyone a heads up. They're going to do appropriate signage, your typical sidewalk close. And we'll obviously, once we get the formal email requesting that the closure, we'll make sure we circulate it with communication with the community. But we felt that just putting back temporary stone, but leaving a huge auger pit would just be unsafe for people to travel. And we figured it was early enough in the season that we won't impact too many people using that sidewalk. But they'll be putting back new concrete, what they impact, and everything should be all ready to go by the end of May.
Are there any questions for, Trustee Jamerson, please.
I do have a question. So I'm going to close the sidewalk down, which means that the few people that will be using that sidewalk have to go across like Riverwoods Road to the other side, the west side, and then go up Riverwoods Road. Is there a path on that side?
No, there's no path.
Okay.
So it's
what
going
are
to
the
be
pedestrians
inconvenience.
What are the pedestrians going to do?
So the part of their request is some sort of a pedestrian detour, as you call it, similar to when you set up a road closure. And so we'll see what they come up with, or they have to come up with some safety ways of people, or they're just going to close it down and people just have to adjust for those 4 to 6 weeks. But it's in the county's right away. So therefore it's, their jurisdiction, how to manage it. So they'll keep us posted with everything.
I guess I'm just concerned, as the weather warms up, which it's doing sooner and sooner as we realize this spring, especially.
Yeah.
I have seen several kids riding to school on the Deerfield Road path, and I don't know how many would be coming down the Riverwoods Road sidewalk, but I'm concerned that what are they going to do? I mean, I guess you could detour them to Port Wine, but that seems not feasible.
If the village can reject their request and state, no, you have to follow per plan. They were supposed to fill it up with temporary aggregate. The only thing is, and then with the bore pit, they would just really have to fence that off and keep it safe if we really wanted to maintain that travel way. for pedestrians.
Okay, I'm, okay.
So the
I get
discussion
it.
would
It's
have
not
come
in
up.
it's not in our jurisdiction really, but it's just concerning to ours.
The village does maintain it though. It is a village maintained path. It's not a
Okay.
county. So it's that gray area.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any questions for our village engineer at this point? Okay, moving on. Our ecologist is not with us this morning. Hello, this evening. Next on the agenda is the Plan Commission report. Chairman Brightcoff, please.
Good evening. I'll be very brief. I have nothing to report. Any
Seriously.
questions?
Did you have this reversed? Okay. Zoning Board of Appeals. Chairman Greder, I know, I was shocked and amazed.
The Plan Commission met on the 11th.
No, Zoning Board of Appeals, yeah.
I'm sorry. The
It's catchy,
ZBA met on the
Sherry.
11th.
It's catchy, that's all.
It's
It's
Yeah.
catchy, me stumbling.
Oh, yeah. Well, what can I tell you? Per the request of Director Witt, who was doing an educational program for us with regard to setbacks, side yards and rear yards and corner lots and the ramifications thereof. And there are ramifications that I certainly had not realized existed. And there are areas where our ordinances don't give us a clear answer as to what is appropriate and what is not. So he left us with the thought, go think about it and think what you think we should do. And I think we need to look at the ordinance and tighten it up a little bit because it is not tight. It leaves questions as to why it's appropriate here and not there, what happens on a corner lot where you've got two front yards and they extend to the back and somebody wants to put in an auxiliary building and hard to follow, but he made it easy, for which I really, really thank him and gave us a lot to think about. We've scheduled a permanent hearing date being the second Thursday in the month, because that apparently is a day that we can get everyone together. And it looks like somewhere in the not too distant future, we're actually going to have a hearing on an issue, which is also exciting. And at that point, I hope Director Witt will educate us further into what we need to know before we wade into that one. And that's all I have to report.
Are there any questions for our chairman? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Anyone who wants to come and get educated into what our ordinances do is welcome to join us.
Next on the agenda is the police report. Chief, please.
The police activity is in your packets. Additionally, I just want to report that we did have another successful flock use. Those are our plate reader cameras. On March 19th, there was a vehicle that filled up with gas at the mobile station and drove away with the hose in the car. So his camera system got the type of car and some logos that were on the side, but did not get the plate. So we were able to input the description of the car and the time frame into the system, and we found the car with the right logos and everything, and got the plate. And they're working it out with mobile. So, so we only get pictures of the car actually vehicles coming into town. So we got them before he went to the mobile station. We don't get them leaving town, so we don't have a picture of the van with the hose in it. So
Yeah, what was this?
they're in contact with each other. So
He just forgot?
yeah, it was a truck. So he probably, when he drove away, forgot to take out the nozzle and drove away. And because he was in a big van, probably didn't hear it and didn't realize that he did it. So yeah, they're breakaway, right? Yeah.
There was a whole different picture in my mind of this, stuff spewing and, anyway.
Yeah,
Thank you.
they didn't used to be breakaway, and there used to be problems when I started in this business. We had some issues with pumps being pulled all the way down. So, but they're breakaway now.
Are there any questions or comments for our chief? Okay, moving on. Chief Tom Kruger from our fire district is here today. Yes, please.
Here we go. All right. Good evening. I'm sorry I was absent for a couple months. Just long story short, my son, my baby is 18. So it was last year playing high school basketball. So it was always on a Tuesday or a Thursday or a Friday. So we just didn't want to miss it. And so it's kind of bittersweet. Turned down a bunch of scholarships to become a firefighter and paramedic. So he wants to go to junior college. Yeah. But I think my wife had a harder time with it than I did. So it's all good. So just a couple of things nationwide and locally in the state. Fire departments, police departments are struggling with staffing challenges. So, and we were short approximately 9 firefighter paramedics. And so that's due to retirements, that's due to injuries and everything else, pension, and that puts a lot of strain on our current employees working a lot of overtime. Our injuries increase, but we were able to hire 6, and we're going to hire 3 more coming in April. So, but we had a lower qualifications due to we just can't find the applicants. So we're going to train them. Back in the day when I started, we were already firefighter paramedics when we got hired, and we usually had some experience, but now that's changing. So, but it's good because they start with us and we brainwash them the way we want to, and they're not influenced by any outside fire departments, and then we get to keep them. So it's actually pretty exciting. And approximately about a third of our fire department has less than 5 years on. But when people hear that, they kind of just, well, holy cow. But these days, our firefighter paramedics, they're way better than the way I was trained 24 years ago. So it's not like the EMTs of today is a paramedic when I got hired. So it's pretty extraordinary. At our board meeting Monday, the mayor and Bruce were there, and our workman's comp carrier, which was surprising to us, gave us a check for approximately $51,000 as a refund. We call it kind of a refund, but due to our hard work and efforts of trying to reduce our accidents and injuries, which all you know is workman's comp is just, it's brutal, especially for firefighters. In 1 year alone, we incurred about $1 million of injuries, and that doesn't include the overtime to hire the people back from that replaced the injured ones, and then that's for staffing and everything else. So they had a program in which we enlisted in, and we reformatted our whole health and safety program. I actually invented a new one. We have a health and safety officer, implemented a lot of new programs. And with that, we saw a reduction already within the last year of no injuries so far. So they were, in our efforts, they gave us like about a 10-15% rebate on our workman's comp. So it's nice to see that, not just the monetary value, but that our members are actually taking it serious and trying to reduce those injuries and everything else. And I think, Mr. Witt, you mentioned ISO, correct? If you don't know, fire departments get an ISO rating too, anywhere between 1 and 10. And prior to 2019, we were a 3, and we got reevaluated in 2019, and we just missed being ISO 1 by 0.4. And that was just due to a couple of little minor things, but yeah, we were pretty stoked. We didn't think we would go up to a 2, but then when we saw we just missed a 1, and for you who don't know, a 1 is 1% of the fire departments nationwide are an ISO 1. So it's 1.5% of the state. I think there's only 29 or 30 fire departments in Illinois that are ISO 1. So hopefully next time when we get evaluated, it's not a pretty process. If you know that, they really get in the weeds with all your data and all your stats and everything else. And but hopefully next time we get really evaluated, it'll be a 1. So that's all I have.
Congratulations.
Yes, I'll stop. Ivan.
Are there any comments or questions for our chief? Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't have anything to say this evening, so we'll move right on to new business. First order of new business is the approval of the appropriations ordinance for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2024. Do I have a motion for approval, please?
So moved.
Oh, wait a minute. Motion for waiving first reading.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Is there a motion for a second reading and adoption?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, are there any further discussion, on the ordinance? Okay, seeing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Jameson,
Aye.
trustee Smith,
Aye.
motion pass.
Okay, the second item of business is approval of an ordinance approving a franchise agreement with Comcast of California /Illinois LLC. Do I have a motion to waive first reading?
So moved.
Is there a second? Do I have a second to waive first reading, please? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Do I have a motion for second reading and adoption, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Trustee Clayton, please.
I just had a question in looking through the agreement. There's something called PEG access channels that are available to the village. And I'm presuming that we don't use those channels today. But I'm sorry that Trustee Dilkin is not here tonight. I was just wondering if there's any way to think about incorporating those channels into our communication strategy for the village.
Good question to follow up on. Yeah.
Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Jameson,
Aye.
trustee Smith.
Aye.
Okay, ordinance passes. This ordinance is approved. Next on the agenda is approval of a memorandum of agreement between the Village of Riverwoods and the Metropolitan Alliance of Police, Chapter 330. If I could ask
I'll start.
Village Attorney. to
I'll
lead us through
start.
this.
Then I'll defer to the police chief.
Okay.
What's in the packet on page, help me here, 77? Is that right?
Yes.
Is a general order that relates to body worn camera recorders. We know now our police officers will be wearing body cameras. This, of course, concerns the police union, and they formulated a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, to which this general order is attached. The MOU basically says that we agree to follow this general order. It doesn't say much more than that. I meant to have it in the packet, but it basically says that in implementing the state law to wear body cameras, the village will implement it in accordance with the general order. So the general order was something that our chief prepared. And the police union only had one or two minor comments. Basically, the issue that they had was that the review of video on the body cameras would be done in a random fashion rather than a targeted fashion. I think we've agreed to that, other than we just don't have the precise mechanics of that. But the idea in the agreement is that we will do it in such a way that is mutually agreeable between the union and the police department. Chief, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I think you covered it all.
So we're looking for approval of the agreement with the union to which this order is the primary attachment.
Any questions? Trustee Clayton, please.
On page 86 of the packet, I think it's page 10 of the agreement, there's an area in red there that says that has a colon at the end of it and then kind of a clear blank line. And I'm just wondering if that's just a editorial thing and that the colon refers to the supervisor shall document their review.
No, where it says shall use the following process, what we've agreed to say is a process that's mutually agreeable with the union because we don't have the actual details of the process yet.
understand.
So we are going to make that substitution in the order.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, may I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Jemison,
Aye.
trustee Smith.
Aye.
Motion pass.
Thank you. Last item of new business is the approval of a change order for work on Saunders Road Water Main Project. If I could ask Director Witt to please lead us through that.
Thank you, Mayor. In working on the water main project, it's become evident that we need a change order to be looked at and hopefully approved to move forward with a change of direction on the length of the pipe that goes in. When the contractors for the 1400 Saunders single-family residential home were trying to pothole the street to find the connection point for the water line, part of this change order comes about because GHA noted that the existing water line was deteriorated to a point that it needs to be replaced. So we are looking at this change order to take that on, to add 2 hydrants and valves in order to manage not only the construction, the stop and start of construction, but also the chlorination of the system and facilitate fewer shutdowns in that area in order to finish the installation of the water line. There have been a series of events which have occurred since the paperwork for the change order was distributed to the board. A lot of things have gone back and forth over the last 24 hours, and I'm going to ask Engineer Smith to update the board on that.
Thank you. So they're currently out there and they're getting to the point where they're finishing up the main construction. And then once they test that, they can go and extend the water services to the new main. Basically what occurred was they initially had 1 crossing, and then now there's the proposed 2nd crossing due to the deterioration of the pipe. Initially, the contractor wanted to shut down Saunders Road, which would cause a detour, which obviously would have to communication. So we were starting that process with the DOT, and then they decided that they're just going to open cut 1/2, put the pipe in, and then flip it to allow access for Saunders Road. So that's one thing that's occurred. The other one is in order to do these improvements that are part of the change order, they have to do a shutdown, which they'd have to do anyways for the project. But this one, it makes a nice clean start and end of the project. They were hoping to keep the ball rolling if this got approved and do it on Friday. Obviously, that's less than 48 hours away. And that's usually our policy, is to give a 48-hour notice to do any shutdown. Also, we were informed that Saturday is a Jewish holiday. And so therefore we don't like to shut down water on Friday when there's a potential of gathering on Saturday. So we have now discussed with them that they, again, if this is approved, move forward, and they'll be doing that on Monday. The reason why it seems pretty tight with the schedule is they need to do, if they're doing this before they're doing the service connections, because you have to test the water main and then you have to get an operational approval before you can connect the services. So that's kind of what's been updated the last 24 hours, and I'll hand it back to Director Witt.
Okay, and I just want to take a little bit of a leap backward on this. When the change order first came through, it came through as an open cut trench across Saunders Road. I recommended against doing that because it would have been beneficial to directionally bore the pipe. Concern being that if we open trench the street over time, that area is going to settle. So when we come through and we try to pave that road in the 2025 season, It may look good for the first year, but it will continue to subside. So we made the change order in a different direction. We set it up for a directional bore. The unit price by the contractor is identical for both. It's $170 per linear foot. So going to the change for a directional bore seemed to be the route to go until I started doing potholing yesterday, looking for the utilities, which there was a perceived risk in doing the directional bore in the event that utilities on the side of the street were in the way. Well, that proved to be true. And the fact that the boreholes for the directional bore would have to be about 75 feet past the public right of way into somebody's yards. It then just becomes more of a mess in doing restorations. So we're switching back to an open cut where we have a better handle on the utilities and the location it needs to go. And we're just going to have to be very careful on how we see this thing compacted so that we minimize any kind of differential settlement between the cut area and the street that's been there forever.
What is the adjusted amount of the change order after all is said and done? I just think that we should have a clear statement about the number that's being asked for.
Right. $68,100 would be the change order. One other caveat I'd like to add in there is this is a unit price project, so therefore they only get paid for what's installed. We do know there are some savings coming through, but we have not finalized quantity since they're still in the middle of construction. So once we go to substantial completion, we can go through quantities and verify those with the contractor and then come back with what those savings actually are due to the amount tied to that unit.
So we're looking for approval of a change order in the amount of $68,100.
Correct.
I'll make a motion that we approve the change order for $68,100.
Second.
There any further questions, comments? Is this staying within the original budget?
Yes, the original budget was $850. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Director.
Just want to confirm that.
The original budget was 850, and this I know that the first part of the bid initially came in a little shy of 800,000, which was
Correct.
exciting. But the 68, do you have the number of what it is now?
Yes, so the original contracted value was $776,230 was the original contracted. With this change order,
840.
I have it in my letter here.
840.
The total will be $844,330. Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
One other comment to make, we did evaluate the total base bid plus unit cost for both Boulder Construction, who was the lowest responsible bidder as far as the base bid goes, took a look at the next responsible bidder above that and compared their base bid with their unit costs and the Boulder contract. With this change order, the total of the base bid plus change order is $20,000 still cheaper to go with the original contractor Boulder. So we're not paying more money with this particular contractor and the unit price increase than what we would do if we went with the next low bidder.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Clayton,
Aye.
trustee Hollander,
Aye.
trustee Jemison,
Aye.
trustee Smith,
Aye.
motion passed.
Thank you. There's no old business. Are there any visitors wishing to address the board? Yes, see you by name. Hi, Les, Barbara, nice to see you. Brad, nice to see you. Randy. The gang's all here. Okay. Thank you for that. We do have reason to go into executive session this evening. We are able to go go to executive session for specific purposes under the state law, and those being litigation, acquisition of property, and personnel.
In this particular case, we want to go into executive session pursuant to Section 2C5 of the Open Meetings Act to discuss the possible purchase of a particular piece of property. And for that, we need a roll call vote. Motion to go into executive session and a roll call vote.
Motion to go into executive session, please.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jameson.
Aye.
Trustee Smith.
Okay, the motion passes. We will move into executive session. The board will please join us in the conference room. Okay, and we are expecting Trustee Dickon shortly. Okay. Turn it off. Yeah, just turn that on. It's better to control the other room.